I hope you're ready for some illogic, because it is time for Season 6 of the Wooper Club League. Yes, WCL content is back after wrapping up an amazing undefeated run through Season 4 off the back of Kyurem Black, Aegis Slash, Rotom Heat, Seismitoad, Weezingale. The squad was truly great, and I had a ton of fun with it. Of course, that was months ago by this point, and since then, I've participated in a couple of leagues, so let me give a quick rundown first of what I've been up to. Season 5 of the 8-Bit Drafts is wrapping up here soon, and a 5-0 start to the season got me the number 2 seed for my section of the OU playoffs. That's definitely an accomplishment of which I am proud. From there, though, I dropped a game, and then had a week off, and then dropped in the first round of the playoffs to the player that I had beaten previously in Week 1. It's unfortunate, for sure, but that player did end up being a finalist, so I can't be too upset. That was a pretty fun squad, too. We had the national decks available. I had access to things like Tapu Koko, Aegis Slash, Garchomp, Mega Pidgeot, Tangrowth, Vaporeon, Arcanine, Drapion, and others that I wanted to try out. Well, again, at least I made playoffs, which is a pretty nice confidence booster moving forward. And then we had a very short Wooper Club League Season 5, which was a VGC season. We had 12 players, we split up into 3 pools of 4, and played 3 pool rounds before going through 2 rounds of playoffs. Unfortunately, there we had to stick with the same team throughout the whole season, and without any practice ahead of time of the format or with the team, I ended up picking a team that I really didn't end up liking. It felt really limiting, and I ended up as the number 5 seed, just outside of the top 4 that I needed to try for my 4th consecutive Wooper Club League title. From there, I lost a couple more matches and ended up in 8th place. I'm really not too upset by that, though, as it's an unfamiliar format. I was locked into a team that I really was not comfortable with or liked at all by the end. What really matters, of course, is this one, WCL Season 6. Most of the players from last season have returned, and we've got a couple new faces as well. So we now have a total of 10 teams, creating a 9-game regular season that we're going to have to go through. Snake draft style, you got a Tier 1, a Tier 2, 2 Tier 3s, a Tier 4, a Tier 5, 400 free points for 4 free picks, and a Gigantamax slot. We're trying out the concept of drafting a Gmax Pokemon with restrictions. That is the Gigantamax slot that you pick is the only Pokemon that can Dynamax. It also has to be the Gmax form, and it also must hold a useless item, something like a Pokeball. Everything legal on cartridge on the Isle of Armor expansion is legal, including the new tutor moves and new additions to the decks. With all that done, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Mr. Quality and the Wooper Club League page. We may or may not have a draft breakdown on that channel, similar to last season, where Mr. Quality, Steve Truck, and I went over everybody's teams and went over what it made them good or bad. We're still trying to work out logistics for that, see if maybe that happens or not. These two, though, Mr. Quality and Steve Truck, have done a ton of great work to get this league up and running again. 6 seasons strong now. Mr. Quality is the commissioner, getting things up on the site, and Steve Truck with strong leadership and good decision making. These guys have been a pleasure to work with for sure. Thank you for continuing to invite me back with the guys. Another big shout out to Automatic as well for allowing us to use his draft league site. It's been super helpful compiling everything here, and Mr. Quality have worked very well together. Finally, a big shout out to my boy Joe, or Sasbo, who puts up with my constant messaging and self-doubt and stupid ideas, whether he lets me fill his inbox so I can get my ideas down on paper, or he tells me my idea is stupid, or he comes up with a stupid idea himself, or forces me to talk through my decisions, or encourages an idea that I've got. His help has been invaluable. Seriously, dude, thank you. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I won the previous league, which in Season 4 for this style of draft, and I was, as a result, given what is generally accepted as the worst spot in the draft, in this case, position number 6 out of 10. All that means is I don't get a particularly early pick, nor do I get a wheel pick in any stretch of the imagination. While this could still be perceived as just fine, I also unfortunately made a rather bold statement in the playoffs last time, and that is that I would draft my favorite Pokemon in the first round this draft if I were to go undefeated. Well, I finished 7-0 in the regular season and then also breezed through the playoffs, so with the first pick, I selected Tangela. Yep, it's a bit weird, but my favorite Pokemon is Tangela. I mean, look at it. Look at the vines that covered up the mysterious body, whatever is inside there, the big eyes. Look at its little boots! But anyways, what does Tangela actually provide for the team? Well, it's a bulky grass type, which means that Sleep Powder and Leech Seed are always on the table. It is super reliant on Eviolite, but it's got a beefy 115 defense stat that cannot be slept on, especially when paired with an outstanding ability like Regenerator. Knockoff is another excellent support move that you'll probably see every time I run it. though Gmax being forced to hold Pokeballs and GRs somewhat limits the usefulness. It also has a very surprising base 100 special attack stat, which can facilitate some cool things like Giga Drains, some Sludge Bombs, maybe some Ancient Powers, maybe, and of course we can get some fat Leaf Storms off as well. Look, Tangela is going to come in, it's going to eat a hit, rather, maybe knock off, Leech Seed, do something like that, and then swap out and regenerate health back. Anyway, you look at it, Tangela is not worth a first-round pick, but I prefer to see this as a bit of a fun challenge. I get to have my favorite Pokemon on the team, which is still very much useful, at least as a Tier 5, and then finish the draft. And if I win this season after picking a Tangela in round 1, we're going to start having to get a little more creative with these flexes. So, when I made the decision to draft Tangela, my worst fear was that I wouldn't have anything decent to pick up in round 2. Usually your first round pick is something big, something huge, important, something you're going to bring every single week, something you have your team revolve around. I was lucky enough last season to have both Kyurem Black from the first round and Aegislash right after that. But Tangela is no tier 1 threat. It is no Kyurem, it is no Aegislash. What I didn't anticipate was the amount of teams that would prioritize their Gigantamax picks so early in the draft. After Dracovish went first overall, the next 4 teams all picked G-Max picks before I finally got to grab my Tangela. That left tons of amazing Tier 1 Pokemon available, some of which actually went undrafted in the end. However, I believe I got very lucky, and somehow, someway, with the 15th pick of the draft, I was able to nab Dragapult. Whoa, my goodness. Dragapult is an absolute menace with a very good attack, a very usable special attack, actually the same as Tangela, funnily enough, and of course has the second highest speed stat of anything drafted, just behind Zero Aura. Just by merit of existing, Dragapult forces Scarfs to outspeed it, and even then, it'll have to be some of the higher speed mons, as Dragapult even outspeeds otherwise possible checks like Scarf Incineroar or Dracovish. Offensively, it has very good band sets, specs sets. It's got U-Turn, it's got Dragon Darts, Phantom Force all on the physical side. On the special side, you got cool stuff, Shadow Ball, of course, Hex as a very nice option, Draco Meteor, Fire Blast, Thunder, it even gets Scald for some reason. And defensively, it has a great typing for some cheeky sets like Sub and Disable. Will-O-Wisp access helps its bulk too. Also has 2 very good abilities between Infiltrator, which hits past subs and screens, and Clear Body, which prevents stat drops from things like Intimidate or Sticky Webs. This thing is truly amazing. I look forward to using it in a similar way to Kyurem, where I can bring a different set every week and be totally fine, even with a slightly smaller move pool and a different stat block. Well, so my next pick, while mostly it is a compliment to the first couple pieces in many ways. It's also somewhat a selfish pick. I saw a ton of weather being picked up: Ninetales, Torkoal, Pelipper, Politoed, Venusaur immediately, all of that stuff being grabbed by various teams. So on my end, it just seemed to make a lot of sense to try to grab that Tier 1 Tyranitar, which does quite well against some of these bonds and their abusers. Changes the weather away and chips away at them as well, while providing a very intimidating presence. Look at that 134 attack stat. And it's also an amazing special wall to go with my physical wall of Tangela, which is very nice, especially one that has a dark typing to very easily complement the Dragapult. And that makes Ice, Dragon, and Fairy the only typings that I am weak to without a resist, though I guarantee the next pick will take care of that. Tyranitar, again, that scary high attack stat. Very usable special attack, too. 95 is not bad, especially with its amazing move pool. So it can at least go mixed, if not fully one way or the other. It's got setup with Dragon Dance. It's got support. It's my first Hazard setter. Is a big deal, too. A Stealth Rocker out of Tier 1 seems to be a pretty big deal. It's also got some cool options like Thunder Wave and Taunt for a little more interesting control. Setting up the sand is definitely a double-edged sword. It provides constant chip damage on the opponent while boosting my special defense, but Tangela and Dragapult definitely don't appreciate that residual. It kind of depends on their items as well. I'll have to be careful with this thing, especially against opponents packing random fighting coverage. Body Press being introduced into the meta is a big deal, but I am confident the big boy will be carrying his weight. So, my next pick, in some ways, it doesn't synergize with the team, but I think it still definitely fits in many ways. We're talking about Magnezone, which may be as slow as Tyranitar and Tangela, and also shares a ground weakness and a fighting weakness with Tyranitar, but it provides so much. It's a dedicated special attacker, a steel type to resist all the aforementioned weaknesses, and it's a way to eliminate other steel types, which could be super useful if, for example, I'm trying to spam dragon moves with Dragapult, or I'm trying to spam rock moves with Tyranitar. It also is an electric type, so You know I love having a very good electric type, and the momentum from Volt Switch is so valuable. 130 base special attack is pretty amazing with Volt Switch, and Flash Cannon as well for very good stab, which can help take care of fairies. So this is a good complement for sure to a strong dragon type like Dragapult. And then you throw in the fact that it could have Analytic as well, potentially boosting the power even further. And it also just makes a great Scarf set if I don't want an Analytic, or even if I can just force switches, and a Specs user if I want to boost those numbers to stupid, dummy high levels. It also has a very high defense stat, which can synergize with a very cool Iron Defense Body Press set to hit physically and boost an already seriously impressive defense. It doesn't do much else aside from that, I admit as much, but I definitely like the idea of a strong electric type at this stage in the draft. And it sure seemed like a bargain out of Tier 2, especially with things like Corviknight and Skarmory just being picked up before this one. Ready to nuke, baby. So, at this point, I had the rest of my draft planned out, and was incredibly satisfied with it. Speed, tires, typing, hazard control, utility, and then Talonflame got picked, and that was probably the biggest snipe I've experienced so far in my draft league career, is that 126 speed stat would have been super nice to pair up with Dragapult's 142, especially considering my other 3 mons are clumped up around 60 right now. It'd have had Will-O-Wisp, it'd have Taunt, Sword Stance, Fire, and Flying typing fitting beautifully with the team defensively. It all came crashing down in an instant. Definitely would have helped if I weren't a full pick behind, but that's the price I pay to grab Tangela the Goat. So I was planning on this and Quillfish in Tier 4 to round out the Firewater Grass, but I needed a new plan. I felt a lot of strain on my grounded mons here, with Tyranitar and Magnezone's picks being weak to ground, everything taking spikes damage and such like that, a lot of ground weaknesses, fighting weaknesses. My compromise was Mantine, who walls a couple of existing teams almost entirely, and provides crucial resists while being a very reliable defogger. It doesn't provide Taunt or Fairy Resist like Talonflame did, but it can spread Toxic around very effectively, provides another very effective special wall to pair with Tangela. It's got immunities to water and ground, resistance to fire, fighting, and steel, and it's that monstrous special defense set. In addition to Scald and Toxic spam while roosting off damage, I think Mantine could make a very valuable Tier 3 pickup here. But I am still lacking for speed, and I wanted to make sure my next couple picks rectified that, as by this point I came up with an entirely new plan that included a last pick G-Max Mon out of Tier 2 and a Tier 5 that should be relatively safe, so I can grab everything else first. I really had a lot of needs to satisfy, so I decided to take a Jack-of-all-trades Pokemon out of Tier 2 and just go ahead and grab Silvally. Spoilers, I don't have a Fairy type, so Silvally is the closest I can get to that, which is the best I can hope for in regards to the Fantasy core. Silvally not only provides literally any type I want defensively, but offensively as well. It's got a stab 120 base power multi-attack from a physical offensive side I felt I could use a little bit more of. I've got setup with Sword Stance, setup with and pivoting with Parting Shot, as well as my second very reliable defog user. I've also got a base 95 speed, which is actually pretty well above average, and nice bulk with 95s all around the board there too. Don't be sleeping on normal Silvally either, who can hold an item like Assault Vest or Leftovers while still getting a good normal type attack and a stupid amount of coverage. It can do literally anything, so I think if I'm creative enough, I can get significant value from this unique pick. So this next pick out of Tier 3 really started to bring the draft together, I feel. Even though it is a repeat typing, Vikavolt, it provides another ground immunity. It's another pivot with Volt Switch. You'll notice that is a very common theme here in this draft. It's another very strong special attacker as well. You see that base 145 special attack. But the piece de resistance is reliable sticky web access. Vikavolt gotten significantly better since last gen, with the limited decks giving it the ability to shine with its own strengths. But really, it was about sticky webs. It can still run a couple of different ways. It's got the ability to sweep with agility. It can also run a bulky roost set. It can also run a hard-hitting spec set, and just even the standard web set. I did notice at this point of the draft a lot of weaknesses to electric, and maybe more so a lot of lack of immunity to electric types to this point. So if people start picking up a low tier ground type and expect it to do anything against this Volt switching core that I've just picked up, they're going to be very upset when they eat a Specs Flash Cannon from Magnezone or a Specs Bug Buzz to the face. There are definitely going to be weeks where I bring both this and Magnezone, and the webs actually pair up quite nicely with the slower speed team I've gotten this season. Definitely excited to queue up Vikavolt for the first time in at least 3 Draft League seasons. So, at this point, I only had a pair of Tier 4s to get before my last 2 guaranteed picks round out the draft. I'd been wavering a good bit on which ones to grab, but one thing I sorely missed from the Quillfish pick that I had planned on previously was access to spikes. I've only got one rocker right now, too, and it'd be nice to get another one. Another big thing I missed out on earlier was the fire typing from Talonflame. So I figured that Colossal could provide that, all that, and a little bit more with a nice little rapid spin factor that can clear hazards while keeping up my own webs, or more. It's another terribly slow mon, and repeats some of the defensive abilities of Tyranitar by merit of typing. But the fire typing itself was invaluable alongside the last bit of hazard control that I needed. The biggest strengths in my mind are the defenses, which can be made even better by things like Tyranitar Sand, or even an Assault Vest, and the move pool, which boasts the ability to go physical or special, along with a plethora of support moves, even aside from the hazard control. I think I'd been underestimating this thing the past couple of seasons when I faced it, so I'm kind of intrigued to see what I can make happen with it this time. So we're now on to my last possibly contested pick in Tier 4, and that one is going to be Sneasel, something I got the privilege of using a very long time ago, but haven't picked up recently. It is another fighting weakness, and we'll be able to go over that a little bit later. It's another dark type. It is a frail mon that doesn't seem like the best pickup in those regards, but I think it'll be a lot more useful than just the impressive speed stat, which is super valuable and is maybe the main reason I picked it up. That 115 closes the gap quite a bit, as previously the gap was between Dragapult's 142 and Silvali's 95. Knockoff has been one of my favorite moves in the game since even Gen 4 and 5, so a stab knockoff with this kind of power seems invaluable to me. Ice Shard also gives me much better priority than anything else I've picked up so far. I think an offensive ice type in general can provide a lot of value in drafts. I think it'll be mostly Banded or Swords Dance with somewhat limited coverage, but I didn't draft it to do much more than that, so I think that's fine. So we're moving on to the Tier 5 pick. I was confident that nobody would pick up the second Tier 5 pick, and the reason for that confidence is because it works with Sand. I am talking, of course, about Stoutland, which has Sand Rush as an ability to give it a free agility boost if it can come in after Tyranitar, which is pretty nice again considering the speed tiers. Stoutland stats are actually pretty decent all around too, with pretty good bulk potentially paired with Intimidate if I want to forego Sand Rush and a decent offensive stat that I can pair with Life Orb or Choice Band to let it really shine. Great offensive move pool too. It's got weird coverage moves you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Play Rough or Superpower, which lets it rip through specific threats on the other side. Getting it out in the sand could be a bit difficult, considering it shares a fighting weakness with Tyranitar, but for a Tier 5 pick, I think we could do worse. We can definitely make this work. And that will leave only the Tier 2 Gigantamax Mon left. So you may have noticed I don't have that Electric Immunity that I talked about previously. I don't have an Earthquake Spammer, so probably Ground type, right? I could use another Physical Walls, considering I've got mostly Special Defense. A setup threat would be fantastic to help complement the Dragapult. Maybe another Rocker as well, something that could restore its own HP. And something that could synergize with Sand. I also would very much appreciate some sort of recovery that doesn't rely on leftovers, considering the Gigantamax pick doesn't have access to things like leftovers. So if you haven't already figured it out, I'm talking about G-Max Sandaconda. You may think I'm overhyping this thing a little bit, and I may be, but hear me out. It's got a huge physical bulk. Look at that, 125 defense, which is even higher than Tangela's. You know how impressive Tangela is. All that with access to Coil, though, huge plus. Big plus for me. Stab Earthquake is big damage. Inflicting a virtual Sand Tube effect is also pretty sick. I admit the special defense boost may have been nicer to go with Coil, but I'm pretty okay with the Sand Tube effect, getting that extra chip, forcing it to stay in. That's not necessarily what it's here for. It's here for that damage and that setup. The thing I really want to emphasize the most is the ability to cope with not having access to an item. When I think Sandaconda, I would think Lefties, of course, or maybe a Type Resist Berry, or maybe even a Rocky Helmet. I think that would synergize with it well, too. The first two are mitigated pretty effectively, I think, by merit of having Rest. Basically, if you don't know, the Rest set works very well with this because of Shed Skin. It's similar to what I did with Scrafty last season, where you can click Rest and then Shed Skin has a 1 in 3 chance of waking you up early. 0 turn rest sleep even is possible because of that. So recovery, not all that much of an issue. It's not that reliable, but it's better than a lot of others. Finally, also, Sandaconda actually has quite a very big move pool. It makes valuable max moves like Airstream feasible, even if it doesn't appear that way at first glance. Overall, this is a solid Pokemon that I really wouldn't mind G-Maxing in a pinch and can function in and out of G-Max even without an item. So here is the squad. In speed order, we've got Dragapult at 142, Sneasel at 115, Silvally with 95, Stoutland's got 80, G-Max Sandaconda at 71, Mantine 70, Tyranitar 61, Magnezone and Tangela with 60, Vikavolt with 43, and Coalossal at 30. It's a bit of a slower team than I'm used to, with an average speed of only 75, but I think Webs can help a ton, and Dragapult is such a demon, I think it'll be just fine in that regard. Going over some more averages, the average bulk on the squad is 82 HP, a staggering 96 defense, and 85 special defense. Definitely looking more physically bulky than specially, but keep in mind a couple of things like Tyranitar's increased bulk in the sand, and the ability to slap on some Assault Vests on a couple key bonds. With 89 attack and 88 special attack, I've got a pretty good balance between the two. Something I definitely want to make sure I'm not caught in the trap of someone thinking I am more inclined one way or the other. I don't have a traditional fantasy core as alongside the Dragon type Dragapult. My Steel type is the especially offensive Magnezone, and my Fairy type only exists when I put a Fairy Memory on Silvally. My Firewater Grass core may be even less traditional, being made of Coalossal, Mantine, and Tangela, all of which are from the lower tiers 3 through 5. We've got 2 ground immunities, 2 Volt Switchers, 2 U-Turners, no Poison type, though I'm not seeing Toxic Spikes as a problem considering the draft. We've got a solid Ghost type, multiple Dark types, a good Electric immunity. I genuinely like the team. I like its synergy a lot too, and it has grown on me more and more as I've started prepping a couple of matchups here and looking at it more in depth. Taking a quick look at some of the other aspects of the team before moving on, we've got a very healthy amount of hazard control this time too. Coalossal provides Rapid Spin, and Mantine and Silvally are the defoggers. Coalossal also gets Spikes and Rocks for a nice full package. Sandaconda and Tyranitar are the other Rock Setters, and Vikavolt of course gets Sticky Webs. It's another season without any Wishers on the team, and this time I also don't have a Cleric of any kind. In 8-bit, the previous season, I had a Vaporeon, which fulfilled several roles for me as far as support, but this time it's kind of a little awkward when I get hit with a status. Finally, priority isn't a big thing on this team, but I do have a couple significant ones in the form of Sucker Punch Dragapult and Ice Shard Sneasel. Can't just boost up past my Speedy Bonds if they can priority too. I get the feeling I may need to be a bit creative with the team this season, and actually, that's one thing I'd like to do a bit more this season anyways. I think I pigeonhole myself and some of my Pokemon into particular roles and go from there. But with versatile members like Silvally and Tyranitar, I hope I can start to get a bit creative with what everything can do in various matchups. That is to say, I can't just look at Tyranitar and assume its role in the matchup because I'm only thinking of it as, say, a Dragon Dancer or a sturdy Rocker. Maybe a Mixed Attacker would be better one week, or Rock Polish, or Assault Vest, or maybe there's a specific threat I need to counter and Tyranitar can do it with a particular spread or item. This may be tougher for some team members like Magnezone or Tangela who appear very one-dimensional, but even then I've got a couple of interesting ideas, some fun tricks up my sleeve. Either way, the pressure is on for this season of the Wooper Club League. I finished with a perfect record last season, so everybody is going to be rooting against me, or looking for me to do something extraordinary. For now, though, Week 1 is against newcomer Jared and his Cincinnati Ursaring. Find out how I deal with Dracovish and others on the next one. See ya.